Hi everyone, today I'm very excited because I really want to chat with you a little bit, and I thought that because I haven't do a wrap up in a while, I could actually sit down and tell you what I read during May, June and July. Hi, maybe you don't know me and I'm talking like this. I'm Clara and I'm the owner of this channel, The Ink Path, where I talk about books in English and in Spanish. And well, I leave you my wish list over there in the info box and also all the social media where you can find me. So, as I said, we are going to do a 3-month wrap up and I hope you like it. Let's start. Well, first of all, as I'm a Spanish speaker person, but I do a bilingual channel, I normally read in Spanish and in English. And if you're new, I will mention all the books or all the stories, better said, that I read during these 3 months. And I will tell you in those books where they are written in Spanish, if you are able to to actually understand them, or if you need a specific level of Spanish to be able to enjoy them. I have a whole list of the stories that I've read during 3 months. During these 3 months, I read a total of 17 books. Basically, what I did was reading a lot during May, in which I started reading a short story called Haiku para un Hijo Muerto by Andrea Tomé, in which the author explores what happened during the tsunami in Asia, specifically in Japan. And in that short story, Andrea Tomé, the author, explores the event itself, but also the shock and the PTSD that was caused by this event, and also deals with the grief. It's a very quick, short story book, but I think you need at least an intermediate level, because she uses a lot of folklore. A lot of literary traditions from the Asian culture in terms of storytelling and metaphors, so it will be best if you have an intermediate level. Then, what I read next? Then I read Me by Elton John. I read this autobiography in audiobook format and this is a little bit of a story. After watching Rocketman, which is the autobiographical film by that deals with the life of Elton John, I decided that I wanted to know more about it, more about his career and his life. So I decided to pick this up from my English library in audiobook format, as I said. And I picked this format in particular because the actor who portrayed Elton John in the film was narrating and acting out and reading to you the autobiography. So in the preface, in the introduction chapter, and also in the epilogue, was the Elton John himself, who talked to you about his life and what were you going to read, and also how is his life now. But the complete autobiography was acted out and read by the actor who portrayed Elton John in the film, which is Taron Egerton. He did an immense job. He was very, very well narrator, but mostly what I love about this audiobook as a whole, although I will speak more about it in the proper review whenever I have time to do it, is that the actor didn't narrate the story. He was living the story, so he was acting out as Elton John talking to you. I love it, and I give it 5 stars. By the way, I didn't say it before, I gave the short story by Andrea Tomé, Haiku para un hijo muerto, I give it 3 stars. After reading Me, I read another short story by another Spanish author called Marina Tenatena. This short story is called De piel y arcilla, and it's a retelling of the Pandora's myth. The character of Pandora is a mythical character who is responsible, according to the myths, for all the ills in the world, all the bad things in the world. And this is the story about how she was created with the sole purpose of destroying the human race, and also how she tried to rebel herself from that destiny, and how she tried to protect the human race even even when she knew what was going to happen in the end. I love it, and I feel it's a very, very modernized version of the tale. I feel like even though it's a short story, it's very powerful, and it's mostly in a very similar to CSA by Madeline Miller, although obviously in a shorter form. But I feel like the level of craft and the writing craft and the treatment of the myth is that high. I want to stop here for a moment to tell you that if you want to know more about the short stories that I just mentioned, De piel y arcilla and Haiku para un hijo muerto, I'm going to leave this kind of tag over here. You will see an information kind of link to a review that I did about these short stories, and also other short stories that I've been reading in 2020. So next, I read The Cruel Prince by Holly Black, which is the first installment in the Folk of Air series, and it's about a human child named Youth who lives with her parents and her older sister, which is a little bit quirky, and then she also lives with her twin sister. So all starts in this story with the murder of Youth's parents by a creature that she is not sure it's human, and officially the creature that killed her parents is not human, is a fae, is part of the fae folk, and they are not good to humans. This fae who killed her parents decides to take the 3 children with him and makes them living in court, because the older sibling that Youth has, like the one that I said it was a little bit quirky, is actually his child. So it's half human, half fae. But for Youth and her twin sister, things are not going to be that easy because they are human. So in this story, Youth will have to deal with the folk fae in court and try to not fall into their traps. I actually adore this story. I think it was entertaining and a good start for Holly Black. I wanted to read Holly Black for a while, but I was not sure about which one should I actually pick, and I decided to pick this one. It is true that it has some issues regarding pacing and regarding the plot twist. Some of them were quite shocking, some of them were quite easy to figure out, but it was a funny, interesting read. Okay, the next book I read was Héroes de Cobra by Iguacel Serón and Marta Álvarez. In Héroes de Cobra, we are set in the kingdom of Galvania, which is a place in which we are about to discover what a quest is. Quests in this world are used as a way of proclaiming new kings or queens, and this story starts with the murder of the present king in Galvania, which leads to a very rushed organization of another quest, which was not thought for that year because the ruler had more time to live. However, when his corpse is found, everything is rushed and a new quest has to be formed. What is a quest? A quest is a competition in which several people ally one another and form parties, and these parties are told to find certain objects which are scattered through the vast kingdom of Galvania, which has several kind of regions and things like that. So through the whole country, we are told that in several stories and myths and stuff like that, we are told that there are magic objects hidden in Galvania. So what they have to do is to find them and to register them as magic objects, and in the end, the party who actually claims to own more objects that later on will be part of the kind of national treasure will win the election and will claim a king within the group. Okay, this sounds easy, right? There are a few things in the quest though. You cannot use the magic objects that you find. You cannot steal magic objects from the other parties, and you cannot, of course, kill the party members, either your group or the other groups. The thing is that this quest is going to be atypical not only for the rushed way in it was formed and actually selected, but because at some point some members of the different parties start to be killed, and with that kind of act everything explodes. I adore this story. It's a steampunk story based on the characters. It's a multiple points of view story, and I love how even though it's a steampunk and it's supposed to be more of the medieval sort, it deals with a lot of actual issues like social injustice, power, and the ambition that comes with power. I like this story very much. I give it 4 stars and it was very entertaining. I will tell you more when I do a review. If you want to read this story, however, I think you should have to have a Spanish advanced level of, yeah, an advanced level of Spanish will be best, because it's a very kind of mesmerizing and compelling story, but it needs a lot of vocabulary. After that, I read, what else did I read? Oh, The Surface Breakers by Louise O'Neill. I listened to this on audiobook. This is a retelling, a feminist retelling of The Little Mermaid by Hans Christian Andersen. This book is more darker and is closer in the way the story is treated to the original tale, to Hans Christian Andersen's tale, than the Disney film version, and I really like it. It's quite bloody. I find it very more aggressive than I thought it was going to be. Maybe the plot wise you already know what is going to happen more or less if you know the original story, and maybe the kind of pace is not the best in some areas, but I love the kind of use of the demands and the issues that women have to deal with today, and how those issues are transported into the world of the story, which still are very present, not only on the surface but also under the sea. I really enjoy this story and I give it 4 stars. Sorry. Lastly, in May I read a Spanish graphic novel called Lorca Lorca, un poeta en Nueva York, by Carla Skembre. In this graphic novel, we met Federico García Lorca when he was already a known poet and playwright, and he decided to, which is based on real events, because this is a real person we are talking about, he decided to go to New York and to spend 9 months, I believe, living in New York, and it's a way of trying to expand his knowledge and his artistic kind of technique, and how he composed the poemary called Poet in New York, which is one of the most kind of surrealistic poems that have been produced. I've been a fan of Federico García Lorca since I was a child. Actually, my first poemary when I was a child, the first poemary I was given as a person, it was from him, written by him, and from that moment on, my relationship with the poet and playwright has been very close. In this graphic novel, as I said, after this explanatory pause, in this graphic novel, as I said, we explored how he traveled to New York and what he saw there. He was in a very nice mood. He was quite depressed and isolated from the rest of the world. So he thought, as well as his mentor, he thought that this was a good idea. And this graphic novel takes us to his appreciation of New York, which was very grey and claustrophobic to him, because he was very fond of the countryside and going to New York to the basically the center of the city, which was expanding and growing and being formed through glass and iron, was a little bit disconcerting for him. But I feel like it's a good starting point for those who want to explore not only his own life, Lorca's life, but also for those who, like me, even though I've read Poet in New York several times, still don't grasp the entirety of the poems. So I decided to read this as an introductory way to get into Poet in New York, which is another book that I read, I think, in July. I love this graphic novel. I feel it was very well done. Not only the storytelling was very compelling, and it allowed you to understand him more and his approach to these poems and how he was feeling, but also in the more technical level in terms of drawing and coloring. I think it's one of the most beautiful graphic novels that I own. After that, in July, in July I read 3 books. I read The Lessons by Naomi Alderman. I listened to this on audiobook, and this is supposed to be a dark academia story about James, who is a student in Oxford, and he's very isolated from the rest of the world. He has no friends, no connections, and then he meets a few people, a few members of Oxford as well, which are very kind of posh and elitist, and they have very different interests. And that's my phone. And they make friends. They become friends very easily, because at the center of this group is Mark. Mark is a very compelling, charming young man who is very flirty with men and women, and he feels like James feels very kind of protected by Mark and the rest of the group. And of course, there's an event that changed everything. Even though I love Dark Academia, I think this is not a story for me. I love Naomi Alderman's writing, and I read The Power, which is one of my favorite books, but I don't feel like this story worked for me. I love the way it's written, and I think the craft is very nice and very stylish, very well written, but I feel the plot was very slow for me, and it actually didn't have moments of impact or even have actually a thread to follow. I gave this 2 stars out of 5. The other book, I don't know if I said it, but the other book, the Lorca, un poeta en Nueva York, I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read, or I listened, better said, I listened to Death in the Nile by Agatha Christie, which is one of the stories in which Hercule Poirot is the main character, and this is the story about how Poirot goes on holiday he goes to Egypt to enjoy his summer holidays, and however, at the beginning of the story, when he embarks into a ship to go through the Nile, he sees, or he's part of an event that forced him to abandon his holiday and start investigating, because a young, bright and rich woman is killed in that travesty during that kind of trip in the Nile. So that moment on, Poirot has to investigate and interrogate all the members in all the crew and the passengers of that ship. I really like this story. It was a busy, full cast dramatization, and it was a very entertaining read. I give it 4 stars because it was great. The last book I read in July was Binti by Nendia Corafor. Binti is a short novella. It's a sci-fi short novella, which is not actually a genre I actually normally go for, but I adore this short novella. I give it 5 stars. I know it has a sequel and a 3rd installment, but I haven't had the chance to actually read them. I love how in this novella we are presented to Binti, an African girl who in this sci-fi world she is part of a tribe that doesn't actually cope very well with high technology, and even though they are very good at creating these items who give you information about the user, and she is, at the beginning of the story, she is given a scholarship to study in an intergalactic, very important university, and she decided to go despite that her community and her family don't approve that. And when she embarks in this spaceship, she starts doing friends and stuff like that, although she is the only one of her tribe. And there's a point of the trip in which the spaceship is attacked by an alien sort of jellyfish, and she has to do everything she can to survive. I adore how this book was created. The pace is brilliant, the way it's described is brilliant. I love how the more earthen traditions and reminiscence of the earth, including a real tribe in Africa, which is the same tribe Binti belongs to, is combined with this high technology sci-fi approach, and it's very well combined. This is a story about tolerance and about diversity and learning to be oneself, and I really like it. I gave it 5 stars. Then in July I read a lot again. I read 7 stories. I started with a classic. I watched live performance on YouTube of A Midsummer Night Dream by William Shakespeare, and I had so much fun. I didn't know anything about this play. I knew it was a comedy, but I didn't know what it was about. I knew one of the characters though, the supporting character named Puck. However, I didn't know anything about the play, and I was very immersed. I actually watched this production that was done in the National Theatre in the United Kingdom with Gwendolyn Christie as the Queen of the Fae, and I adored it. I had so much fun. I love how the discussion about love and desire was done, and it's quite funny how a play that is so old is still so relevant today, and I really love it. Then I read, I listened to an audiobook of A Study in Scarlet by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. This is chronologically the first story of Sherlock Holmes, although it was the, I think, 17th story in the whole collection. And this is the story of how Sherlock and Watson meet and became flatmates, and how they solved the first mystery together. I like this story. I think I would have liked it more if I haven't seen so many adaptations dealing with the same mystery. So I enjoyed how this kind of traditional way of discovering the mystery, even though I knew, as I said, I knew the ending, but I love how the analytical approach that Sherlock Holmes gave it give you more space to think. I give it 3 stars. As I said, I enjoyed it, but I think I would have enjoyed more is that if I haven't seen so many adaptations of the same story. Then I read, what else I read? I listened to Misericordia by Benito Pérez Galdós. Benito Pérez Galdós was a very famous Spanish author of the 19th, I think it was 19th century, or maybe beginning of the 20th, but I'm not very sure. Yeah, probably beginning of the 20th as well. He wrote a lot about the people of Madrid, especially. So his work is more fitted to a kind of artistic approach in literature and many other arts called costumbrism, which deals with, as I said before, the ordinary lives of the people in a certain area. And in Misericordia we explore the life of the poorer people in Madrid. This is the story of a housemaid, that even though she works for a kind of wealthy woman in Madrid, this lady is not that wealthy anymore, so it's only about holding the title instead of holding the money. So this housemaid is forced to beg, to work also as a beggar for herself and basically for her mistress. And this is the story about how she has to deal with being on the streets and begging and the police, and what happens when her employer is granted with a sum of money that lifts her up so she has more income, and what happens with this housemaid now that her boss has more fortune than she had before. I love Benito Pérez Galdós' writing. It's very descriptive, it's very rooted to the soil, to the costumerism of Madrid in his time, but I haven't actually read this book in particular. and I listened to an audio dramatization of it. It was hard, it was very, very heartbreaking, but I really liked it. Before we continue, if you listen to people talking, it's because the people I live with are watching the TV show and they are commenting on what they are watching. After that, I read a Spanish non-fiction book called Nietz de la Memoria, which is basically a short story collection produced by several journalists who last year, I think, or the previous year, they joined forces and decided, because it was International Women's Day, that they wanted to produce a short story non-fiction book in which the figure of their grandmothers was reivindicated, because these people were people who lived through the Spanish Second Republic, which is historically the period of time in which Spain was ahead of all the European societies in civil rights and in justice and equality, and how that ended with the Spanish Civil War and the win of Franco, who started the Civil War when he did a coup, and then the Spanish Civil War ended with the defeat of the Republican side, so the rightful side, the politically elected by the people side. With Franco, all the rights that were conquered through the Second Republic and all the liberties that people had, especially women, were asphyxiated and deleted. So this is the story about several grandmothers that have the opportunity to live during the Second Republic, but had to suffer the war and also the aftermath and the dictatorship, and how their life changed, and how the costumes and habit of the people changed because they went through hunger and they went through being very, very impoverished. And this is a hard book, but a very, very delicate book, and I think it's a very important one to have historical memory and to prevent things from happening. It's one of my favorite books now of all times, and of course I give it 5 stars because of the things that they reivindicate and about the things that they try to make sure that people don't forget. I don't know. I will speak more about it when I am able to do a proper review, but I adore this book. Lastly, I have 2 more books that I read in July, and July, and they are Scarlet by Marissa Meyer, which is the sequel installment in the Lunar Chronicles saga. This is the story of Scarlet, a kind of farmer whose grandmother disappears, and she is very, very focused on finding her with the aid of a very kind of muscular, mysterious guy named Wolf. Of course, this is a retelling in the same way Cinder was a retelling of Cinderella. This is a retelling of the Red Riding Hood, and I adore this story. I believe this is less close to the original traditional tale, which was even better. I believe that Wolf as a main character is one of the most complicated, damaged characters of this universe, and I really like it. I give it 4 stars. At the moment I'm reading Crest, which is the 3rd installment in the Lunar Chronicles, and I cannot wait to tell you more about Scarlet and of course Crest. Lastly, and following what I've been telling you during this whole wrap-up, I decided to reread A Poet in New York by Federico Garcia Lorca, taking advantage of what I've learned through the graphic novel that I mentioned previously, and I feel I understand it a lot more about this poemary. This is a poem collection, as I said before, about the stay that the poet and playwright Federico García Lorca did when he was in his 30s. He went to New York and experienced not only the bustling New York, but also the racial issues that they were very present back then. He also experienced the crash, the 1929 crash, financial crash, and he was also already being very aware of the upcoming war and the rise of fascism, but he produced these beautiful, heartbreaking poems about isolation, about discrimination, and about the differences between the kind of new populated cities and the countryside. It's very heartbreaking, it's very lyrical, and it's very abstract at some points, but I adore it. Well, this is it. This is the ending of my wrap up. I hope it's not too long. I hope you enjoyed, and I cannot wait to see or to rate what have you been reading these past months. Can you leave me or tell me what you read in the comment section down below?